Muy buenos días a todos. Les doy nuestra más calurosa bienvenida en nombre del decano de la Facultad de Geografía e Historia, el profesor Luis Enrique Otero Carvajal, que no puede acompañarles en esta sesión inaugural, dado que en este momento se encuentra atendiendo sus actividades docentes. Vamos a dar lugar a esta inauguración y, en primer lugar, le doy la palabra al profesor Francisco Castro Rego, que es uno de los invitados de la profesora Cristina Montiel del Centro de Investigación Ambiental de Portugal. Muchas gracias.
Obrigado. Estamos ligado ao final, aliás, para o português com o espanhol, mas queria, antes de mais, dizer do meu grande gosto, do meu grande interesse nesta reunião, felicitar a equipa que produziu este workshop, sobretudo a professora Cristina Montiel e a sua equipa, dentro do projeto do MedWildFireLab, que é um projeto europeu, dentro do quadro de Forestalra, em que a problemática das interfaces urbano-florestais foi... Creio que agora... Perdão. Talvez resumir um pouco, dizer que dentro do projeto MedWildFireLab, que eu coordeno, que é um projeto europeu, o problema das interfaces urbano-florestais é um problema muito fundamental e, em boa hora, a professora Cristina Montiel e a sua equipa dentro da Universidade e mais estendida organizou este workshop e, por isso, creio que é uma oportunidade extraordinária para nós, dentro dos países mediterrâneos que temos este problema em conjunto, podermos partilhar conhecimentos e perceber como podemos resolver as nossas situações problemáticas conjuntas. Peço desculpa de falar em português, mas creio que um português despacio será talvez compreendido pela maioria dos assistentes. E muito obrigado à Universidade mais uma vez por acolher este evento.
Muchas gracias, profesor Castro. Tiene la palabra la profesora Cristina Montiel de la Universidad Complutense de Madrid.
Thank you very much. I will speak in English, and this session or this morning will be in English because we are in an international project by the European community, ERANET project, FORESTERRA. And first of all, I would like to thank all of you for your interest in this workshop. For me here, it's a big honor for us to have such diverse participation. We have today with us a representative from the ministries, from the autonomous communities, from firefighters, from universities, research centers, and also military, the UME, Unidad Militar de Emergencias. And I hope not to forget anybody, but you are very welcome, and we are grateful to all of you. And I would like also to thank all the co-organizers of this workshop, because it has been so, I hope, successful because of the cooperation of the Costa Foundation, and the organization which is organizing the Batefuegos de Oro Award, and also BRIF, the BRIF workers, firefighters, that have been very active for dissemination of this workshop. we have formulated a hashtag. I don't know if you are so active with social networks, but anyway, we are proposing you this hashtag. I know that for the last weeks there have been a lot of communication in the social networks, so I invite you to use it all in the day. And I am very grateful to the UCM team that is guaranteed the streaming of this session. We have had some technical problems that I hope to be solved during the day to show you the presentations in a smart way. But it is not because of human causes, but just because of technical ones. So I'm sorry to people that are following us in streaming, but I hope it will be solved all during the morning. Thank you very much to all of you. And thank you, of course, to the speakers, because they are the substance of this, the core element of this workshop. And I know that you all are here to listen to Professor Luis Galeana, to Dr. Marielle Japiot, to Dr. Gabriel Santopoulos, to engineering Marc Castelnau, that I hope will arrive, because yesterday there was an emergency situation in Catalonia and all in the night because of wind. But I hope he has taken the train to arrive. And David Caballero, who is also arriving at 10 o'clock. And of course, the roundtable this afternoon. So we have a very intense day, and I hope you will enjoy it, and I hope all of us will learn together and have a very, very nice day. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Cristina. This is a plurilingual inauguration. It's so nice. Well, just to finish, well, I welcome you all, and I thank you for choosing our faculty in order to celebrate this important academic event. So I'm sure everything is going to be perfect, and the result will be amazing. I'm sure about that. Well, now in Spanish, if you don't mind. Quisiera, desde luego, agradecer a la profesora Cristina Montiel por organizar este evento académico en nuestra facultad, por contar con nosotros para dar cabida a unas investigaciones de este alto calado, de esta importancia. También lo quisiera hacer como ciudadana, agradecer que ustedes sigan trabajando en un tema tan vital, tan fundamental para todos nosotros como es el control de los incendios forestales y cómo estos afectan a la vida de todos nosotros, a la vida de la ciudadanía. Así que sin más, les deseo una muy productiva sesión y estoy convencida que volveré a verles en breve. Así que gracias por venir y de nuevo bienvenidos.
So we'll now shift to English. from my Portuñol to English, to start the sessions. And the first presentation will be by Professor Luis Galeana, and we'll have, let's say, the Spanish perspective, and then with Marielle Japio, we'll move to France afterwards. So thank you, Luis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Francisco. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. We are very proud to have such a successful attendance. We have the list of participants in the workshop. We have academic foresters, forest consultants, graduate and undergraduate students, civil and military servants with responsibility in civil protections. But are there any architects in the conference room? Any urban planners? Any urban technicians with responsibility in urbanism? Any local councillors? No, I don't think so. However, we are here today to talk about urbanism, urban planning, land use planning, building, to talk about a new perspective in wildfire, land use planning and management measures for promoting passive protections against wildfires, to promote land use planning based on limitations, restrictions, and better adapted solutions to fire risk. With a title like this, towards a coexistence with floods, it's most likely that would be with us local councillors, urban planners, urban technicians. Room for the River. Room for the River, it's a Dutch spatial planning response to global change challenges. Floods in the last 20 years are more frequent and severe, and in a more urbanized and vulnerable scenario. Return period. The return period, as everybody knows, is the likelihood, is an estimate of the likelihood of an infrequent event, as floods, to occur. It's an hydrological concept, but it's a concept assumed and accepted for lawyers, for urban planners. It's a concept that is now present in the law and in all new urban plans. And what about fires? Well, global change challenges related to wildfires have a nice similarity to floods. More frequent and severe fire events in a more urbanized scenario with housing developments near the vegetation and the forest that increase spatial vulnerability and that increase higher fire risk. At this situation, there is an emerging discourse in fire community, in Mediterranean countries, fire community, that there is an increasing awareness that efforts should be redirected to systemic influence on the risk on land as land use planning to achieve a sustainable coexistence with fires. In terms of this coexistence, urban growth is clearly non-compatible with forest fires in some territorial environments, but this requirement does not achieve a real impact on society, in political actors, or in urban technicians with specialized in urban developments. We can talk one step beyond about a denying attitude. It's surprising, but urban experts in the critical discourse about low-density urban development processes normally cites various negative effects: economic inefficiency, functional inefficiency, social segregation, environmental impact, but does not mention how they contribute to increase vulnerability to wild risks. Why we do not progress to a new wildfire perspective? A new wildfire perspective in land use planning measures, management measures, promoting passive protections against wildfires. A new wildfire perspective based on building limitations, building restrictions, better adapted solutions to minimize this risk exposure to wildfires in buildings. Well, in my opinion, several reasons contribute to explain this situation. The current situation, it's an intervention focused on buildings and plots, and an insufficient action on intermediate levels. At this point, it's important to remember that wildland-urban interface is an imported concept. We have imported this concept from other cultures, from California, Australia, the States. And we have imported the risk mitigation actions to mitigate the risk that are based in these countries in plot and building treatment. We forget that the States or Australia are countries where imposing limitations to building in private lands is absolutely exceptional, but not in European countries where building limitations for environmental reasons are absolutely assumed and accepted. We have imported the concept, we have imported the main actions to mitigate the risk, and we have imported also the research priorities. The key concept is the defensible space, the area between the structures and the fire, which in normal situations creates a safe area to stop or to slow the spreading of fire towards the structure. In Europe, we have imported this approach, and the main actions are mandatory requirements to clear perimeters around urban developments, to with a fuel reduction, to reduce fire intensity in the vicinity of urban developments. Moreover, most guides and recommendations to owners, whether prescriptive, whether indicative, recommends design principles to manage the vegetation in the plot, in the buffer areas, or in the urban development. In this slide, we have a successful example in California of mitigation by treating built structures and the surrounding areas. This is the objective we have imported, an imported and simply adapted approach with little critical considerations. Why? because this leads to a focus on structure ignition rather than on the complexity this implies for suppression. This leads to a defensive actions against a fighting actions towards the fires. This means, in other words, that intervention strategies are essentially conditioned by the priority given to buildings, the simultaneous defense of multiple dwellings, and mass evacuation. It's important to promote building codes adapted to wildfire. It is also important to progress in the safety of firefighting actions in the proximity of the structures. But this exclusive approach can be a double-edged sword, because with this exclusive approach, we promote an unsustainable urban development in forest areas. Secondly, it's important to progress in the perception of interface fire disasters as a wildfire control problem at landscape level rather than a home ignition problem. This perspective is gradually gaining ground. From this viewpoint, the risk of property loss, of residential property loss, should not only include increased resistance to ignitions, but also reduce wildfire occurrence, size, and intensity. And in particular, it must also include imposing restrictions and limitations for human settlements in fire-prone areas and promoting better adapted solutions from an urban design point of view. Stop the problem. Faced with past land use planning decisions have allowed large-scale housing developments in fire-risk-prone areas. The need is emerging for an urgent, serious reassessment of urban planning and building in fire-risk areas to halt further expansion of this problem. An urgent approach is essential to both the problem of the placing new urban developments, the role of urban planning, and to their formal shaping to reduce the risk exposure. Placing, in other words, imposing building restrictions in risk-prone areas. It is the most effective way to limit the scope of the problem, whether this means a direct ban on construction in high fire risk areas. The limits to property involved mean this approach requires sound arguments. To do this, we need something like the return period to floods. We need our own return period, and we probably already have. The Thai wildfires approach may be a solution to this necessity, to return periods of, one moment, please. The return periods of large wild land fires have the same spread patterns as this analysis shows us in 1949, 1970, 2000s. These analyses give us sound arguments to impose building restrictions in some areas. The challenge is to produce a useful cartography. The challenge is to produce a useful cartography for mandatory purposes to ban the construction in these areas. It's to provide a decision-making tool for the concession of urban development authorization, for building authorization, as the bush fire management overlay does, for example, in Victoria State in Australia, after the great fires, the great bush fires of the Wednesday ash of 2009. An alternative approach to the problem, not based on strict zoning, but on assuming certain criteria for urban development, it's been trialed in the Department of Guard in the French Mediterranean coast. Le Conseil d'aménagement, d'urbanisme et de l'environnement du Department of Guard leads a process of reflections and recommendations to municipal authorities and territorial managers. The purpose is to avoid certain forms of urban development that encourages the contacts between residential and vegetation, and to promote certain forms of compact urban forms that minimize this contact. With the same number of dwellings, the contact is minimized with this kind of compact urban forms. Also, to manage the interface as functions. Functions as golf courses, pathway, pedestrian or bike pathways, agricultural productive land, to ensure the maintenance of this interface. Despite the generally acknowledged significance of urban planning and design in terms of the suppression, it is remarkable, it's amazing how little research has been done to the problem of access roads, urban morphology, comparative with plot scale research. Well, to conclude, discourses are emerging from different viewpoints, defining practices which defend the need to advance towards a coexistence with fires. Faced with the inevitability of fires, what must be achieved is lower vulnerability to them by devising long-term strategies which help to mitigate the problem. To reduce territorial vulnerability, fire risk must be included in land use planning practices at different scales. The questions which must be asked include which zones should be developed and which not, how this development should take place, how the buildings should be designed. Third, the why problem continues to be associated almost exclusively with forest fires. Thus, intervention is focused mainly on initiatives taken by forest and fire managers. And we need a new perspective reflected in land use planning and management measures, a new perspective based on limitations, restrictions, and better adapted solutions on new urban developments. We need to involve urban planners, urban technicians, local councillors. We need a next workshop with a wider list of participants. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we have time for one or two questions, and it could be in English or Spanish, as there is translation. So feel free to ask some issues to Luis. Well, I have one.
Yeah.
About a little bit the dynamic nature of these interfaces. In some cases, for instance, in Portugal, we have places where let's say there is urban growth to the fire-prone areas, and there are areas that have been abandoned. So it's kind of this dynamic nature. How is it in Spain? What is the movement? Is more a movement towards the the forest or abandonment of urban areas close to the forest?
Both of them, of course. In metropolitan areas or in coastal areas, there are an increasing urbanization. The urban sprawl is the main cause of progress of the interface, of course. And in this kind of zones, to redirect the kind of urban sprawl, it's the key to minimize, to lower the vulnerability, because it's possible to reduce the contact between vegetation with another types of urban planning, and urban planning more sensitive to this question, that now it's absolutely not sensitive to this problem. But in the inner regions of Spain, the problem is, of course, the abandon of agriculture, and the abandon some sensitive zones in the proximity of the villages. Usually, in more forest areas, for example, in Extremadura, there are in the vicinity, in the 500 meters around the villages, we have the ruedos. Ruedo, it's an special kind of land tenure and property related to peasant economy. In forest areas, it's an agricultural zone for peasant economies to produce food. Of course, these ruedos are absolutely now abandoned, and on the opposite, there are forest is progressive, and also new residential buildings are in the ruedo, because it's a small property, it's a peasant small properties all around the village. Then the ruedos are especially sensible areas for this kind of dynamic.
Hi, thank you for such a lovely presentation. My name is Patricia. I'm from Lisbon, but I did my PhD in the United States precisely on this theme. So I'm very happy to see that all over the world the science is converging into the same aspects. My question is, do you think there's openness from the entities, like urban planners, municipalities, to listen to what the scientific community is saying?
Well, we have a problem with the urban technicians' skills, the urban technician training. They don't know anything about fire spread. Absolutely nothing. They know well the floods concepts. The return period for floods is absolutely assuming, but the spreading of fires is absolutely unknown. We have some particular ideas, the mass media ideas, usually, and there are exceptional events that may occur, but we don't know how, where, why. As large wildfires, the type wildfires show us that there are some spread patterns. There is always the same spread patterns for large wildland fires in certain areas.
Can I just ask one more? So you mentioned something that is really interesting, the differences between the US and the European context, is that in the US it's almost unthinkable to try to go through the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe, that's very well accepted. So there's a phenomenon in the US, which is the insurance companies are starting to be the engines of change. Do you see similar things happening here?
I don't really know. In such states or world, this is the private land or the public land. It's the great difference. To avoid this kind of process, this kind of dynamics, a way it's to purchase land for public agencies, for public authorities to stop the problem. But in Europe, it's not necessary that we have a strong tradition for environmental reasons to limit, to impose restrictions on building developments. It's to progress to a use, but it's true that a use for cartography is needed. A use for cartography for mandatory purposes is needed. Not this kind of analysis. Well, the wildfire types, it's an analyze tool, but it's necessary to go one step beyond, from reality, from analysis to give sound arguments to mandatory purposes to obtain in the law, in the practice, in the planning practice.
Thank you. Congratulations for your presentation. Do you know any example in Spain of spatial planning where this risk has been considered? I mean, in risk mitigation or prevention, or in the open spaces consideration inside spatial planning in any autonomous community, is there any example of the consideration of wildland-urban interface fire risk?
Well, from a law point of view, no, but in Balearic Island, for example, there are some related concepts to the interface concepts in order to allow certain urban developments. But it is only a reflections, a recommendation about the shape of urban developments and some quantitative elements about the length of the contact to avoid or to permit this urban development. But it's only our reflections with no direct direct intervention on the territory.
Well, very good. Thank you, Luis, again for a very comprehensive presentation, and also getting the good framework for our understanding of the process. And we'll now move to the second presentation. So we'll move now from Spain to France, southeastern France, wildland urban interface fires in southeastern France, Dr. Marielle Jacquiot. And then we'll move afterwards to the third speaker from France to Italy, Dr. Luca Salvati, that will look at the same type of problems in Italy. So we have a kind of a comprehensive view of what is happening at the Mediterranean scale. Thank you.
Así ya está.
Buenos días, señoras y señores. I guess this the only words in Spanish for today. I would like to thank the University of Complutense for giving me the opportunity to attend this international meeting, and thank also to Christina and Luis, my friends. So let's go to France. And just 2 words on my research institute. It's a public research institute depending on the Ministry of Research and Agriculture. And I'm coming from the south of France, Aix-en-Provence, and I'm in charge of a team, Mediterranean ecosystem and fire risk. So some words of wildland-urban interface context. The fires in southeastern France and in wildland-urban interface, and some focuses on the research that we lead in our institute. The context. I put a photograph of the beginning of last century in the south of France. You can see scarce vegetation and few buildings near the coast. Then this is a photograph near the Montagne Sainte-Victoire, so depicted by Paul Cézanne, just to illustrate the land abandonment, the agriculture abandonment, and the recovering of vegetation with Pinus halepensis. Here is another picture illustrating the biomass, the fuel biomass accumulation from Corsica, for example, with the maquis in Corsica, and the wildland-urban interface in a little village, Mimé, in the department of the Bouches-du-Rhône. As you can see, the center of the village and the scattered dwellings inside the forest, with different density for the houses. Middle density, but here you can see that it was constructed inside the forest, the dense forest, and an illustration of an isolated house in a big amount of fuel. So now, some years, we deal with very big fires, very near the houses. And for example, this was the fire of 2003, fire of Vidauban, which went very quickly near to the settlements here, near to the coast, with a big intensity. So the context in the south of France is a hot and dry summer, and very often with a northwest wind, so high fire risk area. And a very big also development of wildland-urban interface areas. We at IRSTEA focus on the ornamental vegetation in the gardens, and I will illustrate that kind of research, which leads us to develop vulnerability models. So fires in southeastern France. You can see from the database Prométhée in the south France region that there has been an evolution in the numbers and in the area of fires before 1990 and after 1990. You can see that in the second period there are less number of fire ignition and less mean surface area for fires, except the year of 2003. If we look at spatial variation of the fires, you can see that in the southeastern, the department here of Bouches-du-Rhône, there are, and also in Corsica, there are big amount of burnt area here. And also a difference in fire causes. In fire causes, the main causes is negligence due to professional works, and also an evolution, a change in the different causes from negligence of professional works to arson after 1990. And if we look at the region here, department of Bouches-du-Rhône, for example, you can see also that gardening is a new fire cause due to the increase of wildland-urban interface. So what kind of fire in that area, wildland urban interface? I give you the definition that we used, which is from the Fire Paradox project, and which was developed by Corinne Lampin during her PhD. It's a buffer of 100 meters around the houses, and she described 12 wildland urban interface types by crossing the housing density and the vegetation aggregation. And then during the FUME project, which was a European project, we developed with a cooperation, international cooperation with France, Spain and Italy, software to be able to automatically map the wildland urban interface at local scale, landscape scale and global scale. So here is a representation of a map of 12 types of wildland urban interface in the department of Bouches-du-Rhône. Here you have the city of Marseille and here Aix-en-Provence. And if we wanted to have this map in order to be able to give a quantitative assessment of the surface area of this type of settlements to the land managers, and we showed that wildland urban interface is 14% of the total area of the department. And then if we put the fire ignition points of French National Forest Office onto this map of wildland urban interface, you can see that almost the middle of the number of fire ignition points are inside these areas. 44% of ignition points are in only 14% of the total area. So it's concentrated in the wildland urban interface with very small fires. And we wanted also to give land managers some idea of the evolution of wildland urban interface during a period of 10 years. And we showed that wildland urban interface are increasing of 10% during the 10 years. So it's a big issue for fire prevention. They also wanted to know where there was a spatial variation of wildland urban interface. In the department of Bouches-du-Rhône, Marseille, Aix-en-Provence, you can see that the biggest variation is inside the department, not on the coast. And the land managers were a little bit surprised of that because there is a high urbanization pressure on the coast. But the most important development is in the area, inside the area, and this is important for the land manager to give fire prevention priority in those areas. Then we looked at the fire ignition, the point here, and the burnt area here in the different types of wildland urban interface. Here it's the isolated areas, and here the dense clustered wildland urban interface. And you can see that isolated area have a very big amount of fire ignition and a very huge burnt area. So if we want to target fire prevention, we have to target to deliver prevention message in this kind of wildland urban interface, specifically in isolated areas. Then just some few focuses on the research that we lead at Historia in Aix-en-Provence. We develop some research on ornamental vegetation, and we have collaboration with INEA. I discussed with Mercedes this morning on that. On flammability assessment on that kind of vegetation because of spotting fire and flame front in the wild-and-urban interface. We want to develop a model of fire behavior in the vegetation of the interface. And we started also a collaboration with Australia on that topic. We get some experimental works by selecting the main ornamental species in the edges of the wild-and-urban interface. We study the plant structure by using the cube method that was used previously in Fire Paradox project also. And we lead burning experiments to get some variability of plant flammability. For example, some results on the bulk density. You can see that cupressus, which is a very utilized plant in the edges in the garden in France, has a big amount of fine particle and is very combustible. And we assess also plant flammability according to live leaf or to litter, and the classification was a little bit different. And for example, for cupressus, it has a low flammability with live leaf, but very high flammability of the litter. So it can provide some guidelines for the landowners for planting different species. We also developed some case study in parallel in France and in Australia by characterizing typical gardens, by sampling according to houses density, and also studying the structure and the spatial distribution of all elements in the wild-and-urban interface. And here is an example of a houses and the garden. We looked at the buffer in the 100-meter radius and described the vegetation, the natural vegetation, and also the ornamental vegetation. And we draw the hedges, all the plants and all the vegetation that we can describe in near the house. And then we designed a scene for modeling and use a 3D exposure model from Blanqui and Leonard in Australia. And here is an example of a 3D model with the arrival of a flame here from the natural vegetation. Here the vegetation of the garden, the edges, and here the houses. And the model gives us the exposure by giving the level of occultation of the vegetation. So we have an example of the intensity map, which is derived from the model, and also the map of the vegetation and occultation. Some the calculation of flame intensity and duration, and the model giving the exposure. We have also a field database. We after the fire, we go on the field and describe the damage, the observed damage, and we try to link the estimated exposure to the observed damage. Here is the fire, the mean flux simulated by the model, here the time of exposure, the equipment, for example, the shutter, the roof of the house, and the damage which was observed on the house, and the level of damage observed. And we develop a model to link the two, the observation and the model. We also are now in progress to develop an implementation on a website. This is for the owners in the wildland urban interface in order to give them some elements to be able to know if they are vulnerable or not, or less. And for example, in that kind of web service, they can give information about their house, about the garden, the vegetation, and be aware about forest fires and wildland urban interface fires. We also have an approach on remote sensing data. These are the two fires of 2003 in south of France. Here the fire breaks in green, and in yellow the wildland urban interface. You can see very dense urban interface here, and a number of isolated house inside the fire. And we want to have a big database on this kind of data by using remote sensing before and after fire, and with remote sensing classification, in order to be able to give rules and to with big data. We need big database because we don't have enough database on fire ignition points georeference precisely in the ground, and we don't have not so many database on damage, because fortunately houses don't burn as in Australia or as in USA, but there are more and more near big fires. Last summer in France, in south of France, there has been many big fires, intense fires, and many destroyed houses. And now the question is how to propose good models for the vulnerability for the owners and also for the land managers. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think we have a very good presentation of the situation in France and your work from previous projects, also from Fire Paradox. I acknowledge that. So we have time now for also 2 questions. And I would like to use the opportunity to have one, which is you talked about the 2 modes that the flame front and the spotting, the 2. What is, let's say, the order of importance of the 2? Do you have an idea, any clue on?
No, we. Many years ago, there was a European project, Saltus, on that topic, and it was 20 years ago, and firefighters thought that there was no spotting at that time, and this program give quantitative order of spotting, and it's a big problem. And now in France, there is a problem of, on spotting on the edges in the vegetation in the garden, and the fire is propagating inside the garden is originated by spotting, but then propagate inside the garden. That is why we are focusing on ornamental vegetation. But we have also to develop models on front flame, because the hypothesis is that vegetation in the first part of the progress of a fire is acting as occulting the fire, but then when fire is arriving, or when a spot is arriving on the vegetation, and then vegetation is flammable and combustible, then the vegetation allows the fire to go to the structure.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Angela Iglesias from Civil Protection here in Spain. I was wondering, I really like the, the study of the characterization of the wildland-urban interface in that department. Is there any study or any project to do that characterization for the whole Mediterranean area or for a bigger area? Do you know that?
I guess that the French Forest Office is doing that mapping for the 15 departments of Mediterranean region in France for the Ministry of Agriculture. But it is only for a date, for a year, depending on the database that is allowable, because we use the French database on the settlements from Geographical Institute, and also for the vegetation we use remote sensing data, and we calculated an aggregation index. So by using the software that I presented, it's possible to automatically map the wildland-urban interface. You can enter the distance. We put a distance of 100 radius, but you can choose your distance and put the distance you want. You can use the software at different scale according to the different database that you have. And we can provide some development with you if you want. The only restriction I would say is that it is developed on ArcGIS, and now we want to develop the software on a free software as QGIS. So it's ongoing.
Good morning. My name is Vincent Mans. I have a question regarding building regulations. Is there in France any building regulation that deals with the fire safety of such houses in the interface zone?
In France, there is a legislation on forest fire prevention plans, which allows or not the constructibility of an area by crossing the hazard map, which is in 3 or 5 levels, and which is elaborated by technical offices like ONF or any office. And then by crossing this map with the vulnerability map according to the stakes. And there is a map of a building, but also of the road, of the electric zone, etc. And then in a community, when they develop their urbanizing plan, they have to take into account the forest fire preventing plan, but it is not systematic. For example, after the big fires of 2003 in France, the Ministry of Ecology wanted to have 20 fire prevention plan in the south of France, but there are many other communities which are exposed to fire and with no prevention plan. And then in that prevention plan, you can say, well, no, it's not constructible. It is, if it is in red or orange, you may construct, but with some organization around the house, and also with some fighting elements like hydrants, roads, and also with some, for example, for the shelters, they must be in wood more than 35 centimeters. Some elements concerning the structure, but not until not concerning the gardens and not the vegetation, except the law of shrub clearing. In France, for every houses located in less than 200 meters of a forest, it's an obligation. You have to shrub clear the vegetation, but it's an obligation, but only 50% of the population do that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Marielle. So we'll move now to the third country, third example. So we have Dr. Luca Salvati talking about forest fires and socioeconomic conditions at local scale, a multivariate approach for environmental vulnerability assessment in Italy. It's a long title, and it will be a very nice presentation, I'm sure. And I think it's interesting that we kind of cover the different the different situations. So we heard the ruedos in Spain, and also this idea of almost preventive gardens in France. And now we are going to look at the situation in Italy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christina, to stay here, to invite me here at the conference, and thank you also, Luis, and thank you all the University of Complutense of Madrid to host our presentation and give us the opportunity to give an assessment and to provide you some elements about forest fires and socioeconomic conditions at the local scale in Italy. So a few words in Spanish. Gracias para compartir esta experiencia en los incendios, en el tema de los incendios forestales en Italia y en el tema de crecimiento urbano. Gracias. Well, my presentation will start with this kind of picture, which is typical, a picture taken from the Roman Empire, from an experience of the Roman Empire. This presentation will be divided in two parts. A first part will be referred to some experience from the forest science teams, led by Professor Pier Maria Corona and myself in Italy. And the second one was a specific contribution from the geographic group, which is led by myself and other colleagues from some universities of Rome and other universities in Italy. So let me propose you some information about the legal framework concerning forest fires in Italy. So we can use only 3 different laws. One was very old, it was approved in 1923, and the Italian title was Prescrizioni di Massima and Polizia Forestale, which is regarding with the ban of lighting fires near forest stands, ban on the use of firewood in woods, and how to deal with post-fire restoration. In 1975, it was introduced a new law according to a new ban of land use change of barn areas, some information about the period of high wildfire danger, and some regional plans against wildfire. You have to remember that in Italy, the main changes in the organization of the regional authorities was done in the mid-70s. And in 2000, a new national law was approved concerning land cadastre and wildfire land cadastre and firefighting new prevention measures and coordination in Italy. Ban of grazing of burnt areas and ban of hunting in grazing areas was also included in this law. Concerning the statistical assessment of forest fires since 1974, a report concerning location, barn area, starting time, causes, and all the personnel involved in firefighting was included and was manually compiled for each wildfire. And since 2008, barn area, digital cadastre of land area, has been established by the National Forest Service. And here, in this slide, you can find an example of land cadastre and wildfire land cadastre in southern Italy. Here we are in Calabria, the southern part of Italy, close to Sicily. Some statistics for you, just to understand what was the recent fire history and fire regimes in Italy. Since 1970, we have comparable statistics concerning the frequency of wildfire, and the peak was in 1985, and another small peak was in 2007 in recent times. Concerning the total burnt area, here you can see the time series from 1970s to 2013, and a very important situation occurred in 1981 and 2007 again due to meteorological conditions. And the mean fire sites, here is another important variable to assess severity and intensity of fires. You can see here 1983 and 2007 as very relevant years concerning the dimension of wildfire in Italy. And here I propose you a very brief analysis concerning the selectivity ratio of forest fire according to several forest types, and selectivity is very high for Mediterranean pine forest and mountain Mediterranean pine forest, and usually deciduous oak forest in Italy are avoided by forest fire. And this is an analysis which is leading us to provide another important result, which is that the 60% of forest fires occur in areas already burnt up in the previous 10 years. This is a map of the forest flammability potential in Italy. This map was prepared by the group of Pier Maria Corona using GIS and other technical tools. And you can see here a very complex geography of Italian forest, because the highest proportion of forests in Italy occur in the Alps, in the mountain part of Italy, in northern Italy, but also along the Apennine chain in central and southern Italy. But here, along the mountain, the potential flammability class is always low. The highest flammability class can be observed across the coastal areas, here and here. We are in Tuscany here, we are in Basilicata here, in Sicily, in Sardinia, and in some part of Calabria. So the geographical situation is really complex. According to this geographical complexity, we can show some technical intervention devised by regional plans against forest fires. And as you can see in this table, regional plans against forest fire are really recent at the regional level, and the year of enforcement is really going between early 2000 and 2011 or 2012 in the majority of Italian administrative regions. And concerning wildlife-urban interface, the policies against forest fire in urban interface are really recent, especially in region of southern and central Italy. You can see here the example of Latium, which is the region who hosts Rome, the capital of Italy, and it was the plan, the regional plan was enforced in law only in 2011. So, what was the real change? The real change in recent years, in the last year, was to change the mentality from fire control to fire management, especially in territories with a very high population density, because I want to remember you that even in the peripheral rural areas in Italy, we reach population density higher than 2,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, which is a very high density for rural areas. And in peri-urban areas, we have more than 800 inhabitants, resident inhabitants per square kilometers. Here is a book prepared by one of the Italian groups working with forest fire prevention across the peri-urban interface in Italy, Professor Giovanni Bovio, Professor Pier Maria Corona, and Vittorio Leone, according to a fire smart management of the forest landscape in peri-urban interface. But what is the problem? The problem, you know, even more increasing wildland-urban interface in Italy, some data, natural forest expansion, but at the same time, urban expansion, more than 27,000 hectares per year during the most recent decades. So this is a strong problem for Italy, not only for southern Italy, but also for northern Italy. And how to deal with this? A geographical approach, a socioeconomic approach will be very well focused on this. Our proposal is to assess the issue of land vulnerability to wildfire in peri-urban interface according to a multivariate approach using both the assessment of ecological drivers and the assessment of different anthropogenic drivers. And my proposal is now according to our last findings in our study. And the keywords of our approach is the local socio-ecological district, which means an homogeneous region which is in between very small municipalities and homogeneous districts in the country in order to assess this kind of problem. So the first hypothesis is that a multivariate analysis and a concept linking to different indicators is an important tool to characterize wildfire spatial distribution and severity, especially in peri-urban regions. And this kind of regime is influenced by both short and medium-term variation in the background local socioeconomic context. So this is the first hypothesis. The second hypothesis was how to prepare a multivariate fire profile approach. We need indicators and we need the knowledge of the territory, the knowledge of the land, where the socioeconomic background is acting actually. So the first step was identifying a large enough a set of socioeconomic indicators in order to assess land vulnerability to wildfire at peri-urban interfaces in Italy. The scale, the spatial scale of our approach was usually ranking in between local municipalities and homogeneous districts. What means homogeneous district for me? It's a very difficult concept to explain in terms of environmental science, but it's very simple to explain in terms of socioeconomic approaches, because homogeneous district means something which is very homogeneous inside and very heterogeneous outside, in the territory around, in the neighboring areas. So, at the first approximation, our approach was to work with this kind of spatial partition in Italy. This is a typical merge of different administrative partition. You can see here some municipalities, and this polygon is the municipality of Rome, which is the biggest municipality in Italy, but we have also some other kind of spatial units, including homogeneous economic district and homogeneous social district, according to the urban planning and the regional planning legislation in Italy. We are studying the whole Italy, so the total of the Italian territory, and here you can find some information about the topography and so on. As I told you before, we need indicators to assess the multivariate profile of fire risk, and so we use different forest fire indicator and different forest cover indicator together with a large set of socio-economic indicator. Here you have the list, but I don't want to concentrate to the list. Just to give a look to the geography of 7 different indicators describing forest fires and different aspects of forest fire in Italy, including frequency, including intensity, and including severity of forest fire in Italy. And this is a first approach to assess the multivariate fire profile in Italy in the last 10 years. So this data include a comprehensive approach covering the last 10 years in Italy. Here you can see indicators of frequency, severity, and intensity of fire. The problem is that the homogeneity of the territory in Italy is really low, because you can see here elevation gradients, because black areas in these maps, no light there at all, sorry, I have my pointer here, but I don't see any. Okay, don't worry, I can use this way, which is better. Here you can see an elevation gradient over there. Here you can see a southern, northern gradient. So different geographical gradients are represented in this approach using this kind of indicator. The geography of forest fire in Italy is really difficult to approach using linear approach and one indicator only. This is another approach to estimate forest capital. You have here 8 different indicators to estimate forest capital from an integrated vision, environmental, social, and economic value of forest capital, the same spatial unit of previous analysis. It was a merging of different administrative units, and as you can see in these maps, you can see again the latitude gradient in action, the north-south gradient, the elevation gradient. So the picture of the forest capital in Italy is really complicated by different socioeconomic factors. What about the analysis dimension for the socioeconomic issues? You can see here a table of more than 150 indicators according to different dimension of analysis. We considered population and demography, labor market, job market, economy, the structure of production, quality of life indicators, so the typical social way of approaching complex systems, agricultural indicators, and environmental indicators. The analysis brings us to give a complex picture of socioeconomic indicators in Italy, and background indicators here, especially in peri-urban areas, are really mixed. You can see here in action many different gradients, geographical gradients. For example, the usual difference in northern Italy and southern Italy as far as per capita disposable income, so wealth in Italy, and total agricultural land in the total municipal surface area is really mixed. So we have agricultural areas over there, and in the Po Plain, in the Po River, and even in southern Italy. So the geography of the socio-ecological background in Italy is really mixed. The analysis was bringing us to assess, using multivariate tools, some different drivers and some different important factors affecting multivariate fire risk in Italy, so the indicators coming from the multivariate analysis. I have selected for you 3 different points in order to be short with the results. The first point is the forest structural indicators affecting the multivariate fire profile in peri-urban region and the latitude gradients. It is a very obvious results. Climate and soil and other environmental characteristics matters in Italy, and this is a very obvious result. What is really important is to note that this distribution of points is mixed, because we have gray point for northern Italy, we have black point for central Italy, and again another population of point, which is the homogeneous district of southern Italy. What is more relevant for us is the identification of socioeconomic drivers, and here you can see the two most relevant drivers of multivariate fire risk in Italy, which are population density, as it is, it's a very simple variable for assessing spatial variation in multivariate fire risk in Italy, and the second one was average personal income, which is a typical variable indicating differences in between peri-urban areas and strictly rural and peripheral areas. The third point, the third dimension of analysis, was a really unexpected dimension, what was very important for us in order to set up policies for eliciting participation of farmers to plans concerning how to manage forest fire in the peri-urban interface and in the agricultural forest interface in Italy, which is connected to peri-urban interface in some cases. And it was the presence of high-quality agriculture. It means that high-quality production are very important to shape a multivariate fire risk, which is not so relevant as compared to areas where low-quality agriculture, so typical olive and vineyard agricultural model, are present in this kind of territory. So this is a very important result for us, especially for the peri-urban interface and the agricultural forest interface in Italy. And one of the most relevant points of the analysis is to identify the urbanization level which influence so much the multivariate profile risk in Italy. And here is the graph which is most important for us, because you can see here different threshold of population density according to a normalized indicator of fire frequency. In this case, the class number 1 was a class with a density, a population density more than 500 inhabitants per square kilometer. And the frequency of forest fire, normalized according to the available surface of forest and agricultural areas, is the highest in the sample. The second class was an intermediate density class, and the third one was a peripheral class of municipalities, which means peripheral rural municipalities. And the frequency of fire is the lowest in the sample. And here is the final multivariate map of land vulnerability to wildfire in peri-urban interface in Italy. You can see several classes of vulnerability over there, and of course the highest vulnerability is, according to southern Italy, is in the largest part of southern Italy, but important levels of vulnerability according to socioeconomic drivers are also in central part of Italy, in Sardinia Islands, and also in the northern part of the Apennine, which is an unusual result for us, because we expected the highest values of vulnerability in the southern part of Italy. And just to give you a final summary of the multivariate analysis, what we can see, the findings, the last finding is just to divide local scale factors shaping multivariate fire profile in contrast to regional scale driver. And this table is helping us to indicate proximate driver and underlying driver. And especially for socioeconomic drivers, what was more important for us is to identify different characteristics of local communities in terms of socioeconomic issues, and especially tourist pressure, unplanned urbanization, and the more general socioeconomic context in terms of demographic structure and economic structure, and disparities in personal income and disparities of population density that are the most relevant drivers in terms of peri-urban interface. Let me close with some consideration in this sense. The multivariate approach we are proposing in this presentation try to fill the gap between different processes, environmental processes and socio-ecological processes, including social and economic factors, which are representing different components of the system, and especially components which are not strictly interconnected in between. The goal is to provide some additional and not obvious information to the fire prevention measure at the local scale, especially at the municipal scale. The knowledge of the relation and modeling of socioeconomic impacts on fire frequency, severity, and intensity, in our opinion, is an important and probably is a required base for a multi-scale fire prevention planning. And it is important in Italy because considering also the high number of arson fire and the highest territorial heterogeneity in between northern and southern Italy, in between peri-urban areas and strictly urban areas and rural areas. So this way is a tentative approach in order to understand the complexity of socio-ecological relations and how to bring them, how to connect them to fire profile and to fire regime in recent time in Italy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was not only a different country, a different region, but a different approach that you brought to this discussion and to this workshop. And I think it was definitely food for thought for the other groups. So we'll open the floor for a couple of questions too. Of course, when we enter in multivariate analysis, the details of the techniques are always a question, but that's not
escape it. I don't want
that's not the issue. But I think that it's very interesting that you try to combine the social and economical drivers in the different scales, and I think it's a very, very interesting approach. Well, I think we'll have time also for other discussions later on in the session in the afternoon, and so I think we can now proceed because we have another we have a small change in our plan because there will be a presentation before the coffee break by Mark Castelnau. Mark is just arrived. Mark, how are you? And Mark has, we have to thank for the effort of coming to the workshop. We know that it's very challenging, difficult times in the Catalonia in this period, and Mark made a very excellent effort to be with us today, so we have to thank him for that. So we'll have his presentation before the coffee break, and then we'll have the coffee break, and we'll have the two other presentations after the coffee break. So the other presentations will be also complementing the, let's say, this Mediterranean tour by Dr. Gavril Xantopoulos from Greece, and also Dr. David Caballero from Meteogrid from Spain. the presentation by Marc Cassanul will be on the challenge of adapting the firefighter operational system to the wildland-urban interface demands. Well,
hay dos cámaras, dos pantallas aquí.
I think
¿No? Por eso este tenía que terminar, ¿no? Esto tendría que salir.
I think most of you will
¿Sabe cómo funciona?
know Marc Castelnau, but he's not only, let's say, a very good expert in the analysis of the fire issue, but also in the operational system. So he covers from analysis to operations. So I think it will bring a different dimension also to this discussion today.
Tenemos un ligero problema. Que si solo se ve esta pantalla y no vemos, es como si hubiese doble pantalla del ordenador y estamos en... Si ponemos el PowerPoint no se ve.
¿Es este?
No, ya lo he abierto ya. Bueno, si bajas abajo. Es el vídeo y el PowerPoint.
Vale.
Esto es que tiene doble pantalla.
Posiblemente, a ver. Joder, ¿dónde está el texto?
¿Español o inglés?
En inglés sí puede ser. ¿Puede ser?
En inglés, sí.
Pero si prefieres... Let me say a few words in the meanwhile they are preparing the presentation, just to thank especially Marc Castelnau for being here and to explain this small change of the program. Because as all the speakers today, Marc is also an expert in the topic he's going to explain. But more of that, he's the responsible person in Catalonia for the topic and others, and they had an emergency situation yesterday and all in the night, so he couldn't sleep today. So thank you very much, Marc, for being here from countryside to the conference hall without sleeping, and he just came for this speak, and he has to leave right ahead because he has to return and take the train at 12:30. So thank you so much, Marc, for being here.
Thank you. I must say that I have to explain everything because I think that the explaining everything makes things clear. Coming here early this morning at 6 in the morning, my phone agenda just pop up and say, today is your wife's birthday. So that's why I say, well, better rush back home. I forget about it, so sorry about that. But that's what happens when you work on fire business. So I will be talking about what the urban interface problem is forcing us to change in the way we think, in the way we envision the future of firefighting business, at least in the Mediterranean country where we live in. But after moving around the world, we realize that we all are facing the same challenge. So I just show you a small video. It's a small fire. It's nothing big, nothing complex in terms of firefighting. So that's an easy wildfire to fight. You just start your crews. You can see the open there where you can just drop your helicopter with your crew and start your right flank supporting them. The fire doesn't cross the small drainage there, and you put the fire out. That's it. Easy fire, cake, just 1.5 hour fire. But that's not the reason. There is an urban interface there. So we must fight and we must protect those houses. And this is a critical fire because after that fire, we were sent to the court to see the judge by some of the people living in that area because we thought that fire not properly. We thought we did our best job there, but it was not right. We are public service. Since we are a public service, we must protect our public interest. But if we must protect our public interest, it means that we should go first for the common value of the whole society. After that, we will have to go for the private value. But your interface is forcing us to protect private value in front of the common value. So they sue us because we are behaving as a private service, protecting rich people and leaving poor people without protection according to their interests. That means somebody that is living in a small apartment or flat in the city use that forest to go hiking in the weekend. She can afford to buy a nice house there. That's the surroundings of Barcelona. So they say, why are you leaving my forest burn, meanwhile you are protecting rich people's houses? And the judge says, she's right. You must pay her. And that's right. So that has changed everything. And that's what I came to explain here today. Just we were working in a culture that says as you as a fire service, you are civil protection in Europe. You must protect people, then private assets, and then forests. That's our cultural rule we have. But after that, we are thinking that we must put on the top the common good for the society, and then it starts with people, private, and forest. But at the end, it means that forest is a kind of common value for society. So that's the critical thing. So that we started a change, that it goes to change the way we think incident command system or whatever system of command we use is designed. That means that if we, in our law, we say we must protect everybody in the same way. So it means that it's more important to protect 7 lives than to protect 6 lives. So in that fire, we were defending houses that were already being affected by fire. But doing so, we were leaving the right flank open to affect more houses and more people. So we were not protecting our people. So we were using the protocols we use in a normal fire service when we go to a, let's say, a bus accident, and we have 25 injured people. We as a firefighter, we are trained to put all the injured people together and put them in order of chances of surviving. And then we start to evacuate them to the hospital at the first one that we know for sure will survive. The ones we don't know for sure they will survive, we don't evacuate them. We leave them die. Because what we can afford is just to try to save a people that will die for sure, and other people that can be saved will die. So this is what that court forced us to apply into forest service to solve the problem of the urban interface. You must protect first the common value, and means more lives are more important than less life. So if the fire has a potential to affect 20,000 people and is already affecting 1,000 people, the already affected 1,000 people stay there, and we are going to protect the next 20,000. But we don't put the next 20,000 in danger just to protect 1,000 that are already affected. It seems easy, but it's difficult to do. But that's the most important change. And how that translate? That translates in changing the culture. It means we go and put common value first. So we must recognize where is the biggest value in terms of life, and in terms of property, and in terms of how important it is for our society. It means then we need to take in account that we cannot leave the power line that is supplying a hospital go down because we are protecting a house or because we are protecting a single people. So that's a complex thing, but that's the next change that is coming. And to do so, then we realize there is another value, another thing we have to put there. Not only the common good, also the fire service. Because the main reason why we don't protect more people in such a fire is because we run out of resources. If we have to put a resource in every house, then we don't have enough resources to do that. So we cannot afford to leave our society unprotected. It means if we waste all our resources protecting an urban interface area, and then we have a fire in a factory somewhere, we cannot say we don't have enough firefighters because we are using all firefighters in that wildfire. So that means that we are creating a new way of thinking in our fire service. That our strategic value, and that's our operational culture. It means we must make that difference. So we cannot no longer drive our actions thinking on the immediate reaction to what is happening. We need to force ourselves to plan to make sure that we are protecting the most important values for our society, and everybody equal, not only people that have more things will be better protected. That's not affordable in our European democracies. So now we are paying for that. And the other thing is that we cannot afford our fire service to collapse. I mean, if we see the danger of collapsing, we must leave things unattended because it's important to keep having the access or potential to protect our people than collapse, and after that, not have any chance to protect anybody. So we can, I haven't come this morning to explain about urban interface because there are really experts here. This workshop has probably the best experts I've seen, what we know in Europe to talk about it. I just came to explain which challenge we have to adapt, and that's the main challenge. And when we look to the incident command system, that's the next change that we will see. As you see, my PowerPoint was left in the fire station last night. Sorry about that, but keep doing it. This is not my best day. But that's the incident commander. We have the planning section, and we have the operational sections, and then we have the logistics. Well, more or less everybody have similar systems. Doesn't matter if you are French or you are Italian or you are English, American, Australian, Spanish, and inside Spain, if you are from Andalusia or you are from Catalonia or you are from Valencia. Everybody have different systems, different names, but at the end everybody does this, more or less the same. Operations is the king. So we have been working the last 4 years building up operations and plannings and sectors and functional sectors and area resource sectors, all different kind of organization. In fact, the incident commander is the chief of operations. Then logistics is supporting, and planning is providing information for the decisions this guy will take according to which one is the most important thing. This incident command system is more or less the same way it used to be the military way of thinking. But when we are starting to operate not only in a forest itself, but we are starting to operate in the urban interface, the planning, knowing which value is more important, knowing where people is, where people will get out of there, which houses have the more value, where are the important things, you need better value. You need a more powerful analysis. And when you get that powerful analysis, it means that's not information I am providing to the incident commander, so the incident commander have an assessment of how to decide. That's not like this. If we come back again to the legal things in our democracies, it tells clear that this guy cannot decide according to the needs of those guys if he has information available. It is not important if he knows information or not. If the information is available, then if he doesn't take it into account, then he is guilty for that. And that's important, again. It means that, believe it or not, in terms of operations, which is problematic, planning is in charge of our operations. It's not the other way. It's not operations that is driving the emergency, and the planning is providing the information to think about it or to decide. No, no. The information is forcing me to use it. So if I know it, I have to design the operations according to that information, not the other way. And that's a critical change. Because at the moment, if you travel around different fire service, you go to the planning section and they provide you a map saying, okay, those are some houses, there are some houses, a road, power line, there's a forest, this area is a special bird nesting area we must protect. A lot of values, and then you are, yeah, okay, I take a look at it, but this guy is asking me for more engines there, I need another helicopter, please send me another bulldozer because I am driving that operation, the fire can overwhelm me. Well, for us, that was the most important information, but now it's not. That information is important. The important thing is that you have information where the values are, and you must go and protect the common value first, make sure you don't collapse, and then start protecting the private values. So the planning section is in charge and not anymore operations, which is under the planning sections. But if you look at all the info plans in Spain, or all the operation of wildfire fighting plans in Europe, operation is in charge, and planning is providing information, and that's changing again. So those are the main defining changes that some fires and that small fire changed everything for us. And we must redesign the way we fight fire, because of course we were protecting the house up there and we were leaving the right flank move, but in the other side of the hill there was another urban interface area and another and another. And so it is clear that the fire went there because we were protecting those. It's clear that we put our priority there and we forget about the other things. So now what we are doing is just breaking down our incident command system. So we are creating fires inside a fire. So we created, and from that moment on, now we are creating an incident commander for this situation with some resources. We forget about him, and then we build another incident command system for the fire itself. So we are breaking and managing that as a complex, having in this case 2 fires, and as many fires of different urban interface will be affected, because it's the only way we can keep our leading strategy or our proactive strategy in front of the fire and not be reacting to what the fire is proposing. The most challenging thing is that if we don't do that change, we will be reacting, and we will be proactive, and proactive means we need to be planning in front of reacting. So, excuse me for that. You've seen a lot about generations, and I think that's important we understand the concept and why that is killing us as a fire service. You know, we started fighting fires back in the 60s, and we are one of the prominent countries having different fire service, but more or less all around the world we all have the same problem. It means that we started fighting fires when the fires started to be big, because there was continuity. After that, the fires became continuous and fast spreading. So meanwhile, we were developing fighting strategies to those fires. The food we had in our landscape was growing, so the fires became continuous, fast, and intense. That was the third generation for us of wildfires, of how we define it. We again developed more efficient firefighting systems. Then appeared the fourth generation, means continuous, fast, and intense fires affecting neural interface. And then we started to develop strategies to protect our woodland neural interface. And then what appears is the continuous, fast, intense fires affecting neural interface, but in a complex area. It means simultaneity of big wildfires being fast, continuous, and intense. So that has been the problem, and never we have had so big wildfires losing or creating so much damage. Never have we had so many resources as the one we have had now. So that's the problem, and meanwhile we are focusing the same way to solve the same problem. We will keep having the problem, and as I explained a lot of times, the negative stress that it happens in all different ways in our human society and the way we decide, it's happening also in wildfire. I explained that a lot of time. It's not mine, that presentation. It's from Alviver. It's a Canadians and Americans, everybody has the same problem. It means every time we have a fire, we react the same way, which is direct attack. And if the fire is getting more intense, we react the same way, which is direct attack and aerial support and all different kinds of resources. But that's human. We react to a problem the same way we have been solving the problem before. And we don't realize the problem is changing. We just keep insisting if we don't solve the problem. And that's what has been happening, and even more in the urban interface, and that's negative stress. And if we keep building up intensity in our fire, we keep responding the same way, but insisting. And insisting. Ground fires, we insist the same type of response, and finally, extreme fires, we insist. That's fear. We can tell all the world that that's fear. We are overwhelmed. We don't know how to react, so we try to attack as soon as possible and with as many resources as possible to go up. And then we end up with that type of response. Look at that. Small fire. Myself and my grandfather could put that out, but we have 5 engines there to fight that fire. Why is that happening? Because we have fear. We don't want to allow that fire to grow and become a big wildfire. We know we will fail. We are under the negative stress, the fear, and the 5th generation of fires is there. And that's our problem. We've been evolving that and trying to create all different types of responses, simulations, technology. The technology hub is there, but at the end, what happens is we don't understand the role of fire. We don't assume planning as a responsibility, so we put all our hope in suppression, and then we apply negative selection, and then we have the big wildfires. So that's happening everywhere. And negative selection is easy to explain. It means we have Ricardo Vélez here, I realize now. It's an honor to have you here. But they created, that generation, they created what we have today. And they did their best doing that. But doing so, we forget about all other things. And we concentrated in the 90s just to put the fires out. And we managed to do that. We put all fires out. And in the human interface, we do that a lot better. But what happened when you do that? That it's not possible for a low intensity fire to burn landscape, to manage landscape. So the fire that will burn landscape will not be low intensity, will be with enough intensity to overwhelm the fire service. And the better the fire service is, the bigger the intensity will be for the fire that will overwhelm that fire service. So that means negative selections. We are only allowing to survive the worst fires. And the better we try, the worse the fire will be. And that's what that has been the evolution. And statistics in Catalonia. If you have a fire in my town, which is in the Ebro Valley, southern part of Catalonia, approximately we will send a crew of 5 people per hectare. Exactly, it's 1.2 crews per hectare. But you have the same fire around Barcelona. We are sending today 9.3 crews. That's because we are reacting to the pressure, to the urban interface, to the people living there. So we are not reacting to the surface in danger. We are reacting to the people in danger. So again, we must think on that. But we've seen few really critical human interface fire. And I want to show some pictures of the 98 fire in Solsona. It was one of the big firestorms I've seen. From that moment to now, I've seen a lot more. But this shows clearly what a wildfire human interface is. Not the normal fire affecting the interface, but a third generation wildfire just running into a urban interface area. Look at this house. Everything around the house, approximately 300, 500 meters, has been worked or plowed by the tractors there to protect the house. And all the neighborhood is there, inside. And they're waiting for the fire to pass by. And then the fire is arriving. But it's a convective fire. It's not a normal fire. So in front of the convective fire comes the smoke, the fog. Impossible to fight that fire with all the aerial resources. You can have 200 if you want, but they could not drop anything in there. And with that fog, later on, it came the fire environment with all the spotting. So everything that hasn't been plowed is starting to burn. Now the convective cell is coming through the area. So it's not a problem of firefighting. It's a problem of operations are not possible in there, and that's what we need. And so we've seen firestorms all over our country. Those storms, that's 2005. We never thought that could happen. I saw that in Canada, United States, or Siberia, but never in Catalonia. The sea is too close. Well, here they are. And that's a typical example. At the end, at the 21st century, what we are doing, we can do is we cannot have any other effect confronting those wildfires. And that, again, drives us to fear. That's the vision a lot of our politicians have about fire, about forests. Forests are starting to be more a kind of problem for our society than anything else. That's why we, to protect our people, are creating distance between our society and the forest. And initially, we were trying to put our society closer to forest. So there's a lot going on, and that means that we are losing that battle. And losing the battle because we have been using all the time trying to fight fires, operations, and trying to protect values first, and not trying to think the big picture. So I will show, to finish, and not to do things faster, how we think we can just bring the big picture into this scenario and change the situation a little bit. So I will not run into everything because we've done a lot of presentations and Christina is doing a lot of reconstruction of history of wildfire. But we learned a long time ago that learning from our history of fire, we can understand that we have different species of fire. It means different of fire. I mean, the blue arrows are wind-driven fires, but the wind-driven fires in that part of that area are burning in one direction, and in this area are burning in that direction. That means those are the fires we call fire of design, just trying to mimic the physics of the work forest engineers used to do in hydrology. We mimic that theory to create the fire regimes and to create the return period of that fire and the type of event of design. And so according to that, we design our policy of firefighting, we design our policy of prevention. Doing so, it means that today we already know what a fire can do. So I don't need to wait until the day I will have the fire. I know exactly, according to the type of weather event and the area, which type of fire I will have, how that fire will move. So I can plan the same way I am planning with floods, where to put houses. I can do the same for fire, more or less. And fire is not flying, well, it's sending spot fires, but it's saying the and in the landscape, it's following a logic path. So we can break landscape in pieces, we call that potential, and we can create the connectivity, the net of connectivity. So we know that a fire to arrive there, and there the brown color means timber value, needs to go through gas value, but before that needs to go to the red, which is U interface value. Well, every color means a value, and every piece of landscape has its own value, but it's connecting pieces and pieces. So according to that map, we know that having a fire starting there, if I protect right flank, it means I am protecting all those values. If I'm attacking left flank, and right flank, I'm protecting those values. And I know which pieces will have which effect on the landscape. So according to that, we are proposing that since we must protect the common value first, and we can afford to collapse as a fire service, we need to plan ahead our strategy and communicate our public, the people we work for, because we are a public service, which will be the result of that wildfire according to the situation now. We call that a contract between the fire service and the society. We call that socialization of the risk. It means you say, listen, that's what the fire will do, and those are the fire we will lose there. We can do limited things there. We cannot protect everything. Let's talk and let's decide which values we protect first, and protecting that will mean that we will lose something else. I mean, that's the cost that the benefit will come at. And we can do that in peacetime. So I show you an example, and I show an Irish example because it's not good to use our example because they hurt. But Ireland has had problems. That's Belfast City. Belfast has a problem of water, and since the water catchment come from those mountains, when they have fire there, all the contamination from the acidic rain from Manchester and Leeds in UK is going into the water. So Belfast has to, it's one of the cities where they see a lot more days of rain in Europe, but they have to import water from other places because of that. So they decided, they asked us to do an approach in how to manage fires there and how they can not lose everything in terms of water catchment and still protect environment and still protect the uses of the eastern moors, which is the mountains. So we divided more or less the mountains in plots, and those plots are more or less the potential of fire and the graphic. It means that's the logic of the fire there. It's an easy one, but it's good to explain. So that's telling the connectivity time between one plot and another, and the color of the arrow is telling you in green, it means if a firefighter is there, he will put the fire out. In yellow means if the firefighter is there and he tries hard, he has chances to put it out. But if it's red, doesn't matter how many firefighters we have there, we will not put it out. So sending firefighters to avoid that is wasting them. Sending firefighters to yellow can be. Sending them to green means for sure you will get it. So the problem is, what we'll do first? If the initial crew arrives, it goes straight there, or it tries that or that. So we cannot try everything. Whatever we decide, we will lose something to protect something. And that needs to be decided. Then to solve the equation, we added the value. So we call for everybody on town to say, okay, you have 5 points. Just put your points wisely. So if you put all 5 points in that area, you cannot put any other point in other areas. And if you put 1, 1, 1, well, it's up to you. So everybody have different interests. Some of them are hunters, some of them are hikers, some of them are shepherds, some of them has a hotel, so they want to have a nice scenery. Some of them are worried about the water catchment. So everybody have different interests. But we have a fire service. When we decide to put fire out to minimize the surface burn, or at least to try, we don't understand that it's not surface what is important in your interface. Are all the other values people is projecting over that landscape. And we don't know anything about that. So we need to know that. So that's a map of what the fire can do and where the values are. And that's an easy graphic of how the fire will go that way. So if we transform that in something else that we, forest engineers, know very well, which is a graph of a project, how different steps of a project happens at every step and how they connect. It's easy. When we do a bridge over a river, we do that type of project. When we do a planning of a forest for the next 50 years, we do that type of projects. So let's do that in that project and the connections. And that's a graphic of decisions to be made. And that, on the blue, you see the values we lose at every time step. And in orange, the value we lose at every time step. And you see that by the third time step, we are losing 50% of the value. But the most important thing, we have 6 and 7 decisions to be made at that moment. Excuse me, 13 decisions to be made by a fire service in the initial hour. That's impossible. For sure they will fail. So, if it's a forest fire, let's talk about the forest value, but here is a lot more values. A lot more values. And of course, we can bring that into the forest fires, where people is projecting all their values, and it's also happening. So, going to solve or trying to solve the urban interface problem, we are changing the whole way we fight fires. That's what's happening. And at the end, to do that, then we can start to think according to that point of view. That means this graphic telling us that all the yellow and red connections are 57% of the landscape. And that for sure will be burning. And then we can either protect 7 or 11 or 25%. It depends, it's a decision to be done at that moment, but with all the pressure of the people there. Even the people that you cannot protect will be putting pressure on you to protect them. And if you protect them, they will use everything, which is 100%. But if only a decision is taken, which is, if you arrive there first, go there, easy. One, what you will do is that you will protect for sure 18%, we lose still 57%, and then you will have options if more resources come to protect 25%. That's what will happen if you protect that right flank. And then if you go to protect the left flank, it means the connection, this connectivity there, you are protecting 43%, for sure you will save it, and still you will lose 57%. And if you want to reduce that 57%, you can do fuel management or forest management 5, which is the hub of connectivity in the high intensity fire, and then you will reduce that. If you do the management in 5, that's what you will get. Never, that you have 22% of the forest will never burn, 43% you for sure will protect, and 78% can burn, but it means only 35% will burn. So, I am getting to the end.
Yes.
With the strategy,
and
yeah, it's the last one.
With not the time, but also your train.
Yeah, don't worry. I must go home today, I'm sure. So, at the end, what I'm telling, there is an opportunity. If we change our culture of decision and we put the planning in front of operation, there is an opportunity to change the way we fight fires and to get an agreement with our society and not to leave uncertainty, which was the purpose of that talk, not to leave uncertainty to the day of fire. So we can reduce the uncertainty of the outcome of any wildfire if we are starting to plan the decisions we will make of a fire service the day of the fire according to the values we need to protect after listening to all our society. So in bringing the common value democratically into our fire service and not leaving the decisions to a single guy to impose their will to everybody. Because at the end, when I'm deciding what I'm doing about fire, what I am doing, I, myself, alone, I am taking a decision that will change the landscape for my generation. And probably the change will still be there when I will not be in this planet Earth. Because fighting a fire, we've been thinking that your interface, it forces us to defend. But just look at the other way. Every fire we have is an opportunity to be stuck in defending the situation we already have now. But there is an option, and it's up to us to change that defensive approach to a creative approach. Because in our decisions, we are not protecting the landscape we have. We are creating the landscape of tomorrow. And that's changing everything. That's what your interface is bringing to Forest Service, or Fire Service. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, it was a fascinating presentation with lots of food for thought. I'm not sure if we have time for the number of questions that possibly it's important to have, but I think for a couple of questions yet before coffee.
We can go to coffee break and ask questions.
And that's the practical approach to things. Possibly go to the coffee break and ask directly Mark to the many questions, and he has always the operational responses to the big problems. And well, thank you very much for the.
Before ending, sorry, I want to say that all those ideas wouldn't have been possible without the cocktail of ideas that fire paradox means for us, and all the effort that people like Cristina are doing, or Ricardo did before, and all these workshops are doing. So don't take that as those guys have crazy ideas. No, that's where we get after listening to everybody. But I think it's important we all think as a community where to go, because it's not a matter of a single fire service. It's we as a society, as Europe, and in our values as a society, how we solve a problem. And that's critical, and it changed the game. And well, we'll see if we are capable of doing it, or we will lose everything in that process. But thanks again for listening in a day that is difficult for me.
So we'll have a coffee break, 15 minutes, and we'll be back.
the switch.
And you must be all the time
Pushing all the time.
Okay.
No me está viendo la una. Exacto. Pero a la tarde va a haber 2 horas de ronda y tiro. Esta tarde hay 2 horas de ronda. Es más importante que hable los estudiantes, que para eso están. Gabriel y David tienen que tener todo el tiempo que necesiten.
Well, thank you. We are going to restart. I know that it's not very easy to restart after the breaks. Of course, very interesting discussions during the coffee break, I'm sure, stimulated by the speakers in the morning. And we are going to continue to make the tour of the Mediterranean. Now we were already in Spain, we were already in France, in Italy, and now it's the time for Greece. And it's a pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Gavriil Xantopoulos. He's going to talk about forest fires in wildland-urban interface in Greece. And thank you for also trying to control the time that
okay.
will...
You promised to put me in a difficult position, so...
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to be here. Hello, everybody. It is difficult to make a presentation that will be more interesting than the one preceding me by Mark Castelnou. It has been a very good one. And it is because he had all this thinking, and we have to be critical about what we do, the ways we do things, in order to improve and in order to get into better results by changing policies when needed. Of course, we have to think very carefully that all this comes out of one court decision, at least the way he presented it, and that's very important. Sometimes court decisions are not necessarily taking into consideration the operational aspects. I was wondering if you try to save the other community and then your firefighters burn because you did not support them operationally, what will be the outcome of this and the court litigation that will follow? So it's not this simple. Here is a picture of how things have evolved in Greece. You will see a very strange pattern. In other countries as well. Does tell me something. So you're seeing a period here where fires are not very large. The burnt area in Greece is not very large. You're seeing a growing area, and before 1998, all this is in the responsibility of the Forest Service for firefighting. And then we come into the era of the fire service, the urban fire service, which undertook the responsibility of forest firefighting, and where the pattern has become quite different. And having this in mind, you will note some key points that until 1970, forest fires were not considered a serious problem in Greece. When I was studying forestry in 1976 to 1980, we only had one, let's say, two-month period on forest fires within the forestry school, and that was 2 months within the forest protection general course. So they were not important. They were mainly controlled by rural people. And the Forest Service was truly functional in regard to being an operational organization that did a lot of work in the countryside, in the forest lands, that had also importance for the local populations, because they were doing, let's say, works that they created bridges, roads,
and they tried to stop the torrents from flooding villages, etc., etc. And all this also created work for the people. So they were very beloved and they were in good contact. And so the people would run to help in fighting fires. There were no fire trucks until 1970 in Greece, no forest fire trucks. So a few fire trucks from the urban service, and the rest was agricultural equipment and hand tools by the local people. The dead fuels in the forests were, I don't know what that says. So the dead fuels in the forests were limited, especially around villages, because people would use all the dead material for their cooking and heating needs. And agricultural cultivations were kept without dead fuels. And there was no problem with wild and urban interface fires. No notion of this thing existed. Here you see the population changes in Greece. Until the 60s, Greece was mainly a rural country, with more than 40% of its population living in rural areas. Rural areas defined something like places with less than 2,000 people. So we're seeing here at 44% in 1960, and we're seeing here 22% in 2015. So we have a very significant drop in the population. That's the overall population. But there was an immigration pattern that followed after the Second World War, where we had a very strict and difficult occupation that created a lot of disaster in Greece. It was followed by the Civil War, and the country was in a state of devastation by the beginning of the 1950s. In the 60s, there was a wave of immigration abroad and a move of population towards larger cities where people could find jobs. This trend continued until the 2000s, resulting in the development of large, overcrowded, congested cities. Attica, which is the area around Athens, is the most prominent example. You see here how the population grew from 1981 up to the Olympic Games in 2004, and then you are seeing a decrease. That is a lesson that we tend as people to say, it was here, it will be here, it was here, it is here, it will be there. Not necessarily so. Things change. In this case, we have had among this population, there were also immigrants coming from Albania, from Russia and other countries. And then, sorry. And then you start having problems with financial situation, and the people just start to go because they want to find work in another place. They're not tied to the place, so suddenly this changes. But in this curve going upwards, we did have a lot of change in regards to what we call the wild and urban interface. There is another point I would like to make, and I will need to go back quickly to this initial transparency. Look at this. In the 60s is when the main wave of moving out took place. And by the 67, we had the dictatorship, junta, in Greece. So many people, especially of leftist origin, they were put on the side, in the corner. They could not find jobs and so on. And as a result, they had to immigrate. Many of them in United States, Canada, Germany, Belgium, Australia, and so on. It is roughly 10 years later, in 1977, that we start seeing the outcome of this exodus. That is, it takes about 10 years, roughly, 10 to 15 years, when we start having the results of the fuel built up. And this is what is printed here. In 1998, I wrote an article saying that when we moved from the Forest Service to the Fire Service, and practically we crossed out the work of the Forest Service as an operational organization, I foresaw in writing, there is an article on that, that in 10 years' time, we will have a new wave of problems, a higher difficulty level. And it did happen in 2007, exactly in 10 years' time, the fuel buildup. And I have written it then, and I wrote it in the beginning of this fire season, again in an article, saying that the 10 years have passed and we are ahead of the problem now. And it happened that year. So you have to learn from these, and these are good examples that you have to take into consideration. Now, the population explosion in the large urban centers, for which there was very little planning, created serious problems such as overcrowding, traffic jams, heavy pollution and noise, uncomfortable heat in the summer, etc. I grew up in Thessaloniki, it used to be, which is the second largest city, it used to be 350,000 people, now it is about 1.5 million people. Athens was about 1.5 to 2 million people, it went to 3.5 million people, depends on what you count as Athens. So you understand how much congestion exists there. There was no infrastructure except for the metro system that was built in the 90s, and it gave relief to the city. It was a nightmare before that. As a result, and with economic growth that began in the late 1970s, people started looking for better living conditions away from the congested city centers. Thus, they started building new homes at the outskirts or at a short distance from the cities, either for year-round occupation or as vacation homes. There were three additional factors that helped with the development of wild and urban interface areas. One was that we had development of tourism, which means that there was need for infrastructures, tourist infrastructures, hotels, rooms to let, and so on. And many of these rooms to let were put somewhere in the forest or in agricultural forest lands. And then we had increased availability of private cars. In 1980, it was very difficult to buy a private car in Greece. Only rich people would have it. By 1995, everybody would have a private car. And then expansion of the transportation network around large cities, like the Attica Highway around Athens or the suburban railway, they allowed people to commute. And so it became easy for them to live outside and come in. For example, this used to be the national road. This is Attica road that goes around. So along this, from up around here, out here, there are new wild and urban interface areas because people can move from there to the center of the city. They move here and then they come down to the center. And if you look at this, you will see Athens, which is the basin, and it has Egaleo Mountain, Parnis Mountain, Pendeli Mountain, Hymettus Mountain. 4 mountains are surrounding it and enclosing it. So all the building has been coming to a border with the forest vegetation. So it's clearly a classic wild and urban interface area. The new houses were often built outside the established city plans because such plans were not ready. There were poor reflexes from the state mechanisms, but also partially due to the lack of a complete land cadastre. We do not still have a complete land cadastre all over Greece. So if you don't know what is whose, you have a problem, and the problem comes in the fact that you cannot really plan, or you have to fight citizens who say, oh no, this is my land, and so on. And these are still in the fighting now in Greece. People also prefer to choose places they liked, by or within a forest, near the coastline, or both. A city plan would limit them, so they just went and found a place to build, and they built it. They had another point in favor of this in this direction, which is the possibility to build legally outside city plans in agricultural land of 0.4 hectares. That is, if you owned 0.4 hectares, you were allowed to build a house of 200 square meters. And that, you could do it anywhere, which means, and you can still do it, which means that you would then have to ask for electricity to come, for telephone network to come. You would maybe not have any system for sewage, and all these problems that come with it. And there was also poor effectiveness of the state mechanism in stopping illegal land occupation development. So people who did make the illegal housing, they were not just kicked out, but sometimes they grabbed forest land and so on, and they were for a long time being there illegal, and even today they demand that they get this legalized with all the extra cost that this means to society. And in the current situation of economic crisis, the government says, okay, you pay a fine so that we get some money, and you stay on your land temporarily. So this is one of the planned, let's say, situations, but there are unplanned as well. And all these are wild and urban interfaces. This is just north of Athens. In addition to that, there is another situation, which are the RUIs, the rural-urban interfaces. As the younger population left the villages, especially the smaller ones near the forests, the situation there changed in many respects. Smaller population with fewer young people, that is, population left, the old people were left on the side. Less consumption of dead woody fuel, woody biomass for cooking and heating. There was a smaller need, smaller population. There was a replacement of wood by other more convenient energy sources. There was less effort in proper agricultural cultivation. I mean, no cleaning of vineyards, no cleaning of olive groves, and so on. Now the fuels reach the villages. In the past, around the villages, there were, let's say, places to cultivate vegetables, things like that. Now the fire will go all the way to the village. The houses that were abandoned, they are maintained very poorly. They are still used. That is, when you go, let's say, on Easter or on other celebrations, or in the summer, people, they say, I will go to my village. They live in Athens, but they will go to their village. It means that they will come where they were from, but they will not put very much money in keeping this house in shape. So the wood will be rotten, there will not be good paint, there will not be some kind of protection, there will be some missing parts and so on. So all these create problems. And now fires can cause damages to homes and villages or even rip through the village. There is no official limit for slope steepness when these are the characteristics of WUI. So they can build in slopes like this. Structures are often found on steep slopes with thick vegetation below them, which is the most difficult situation. The lots are generally small, quite often less than 0.1 hectare, although for out-of-city plan development, the law requires a minimum lot size of 0.4, which means that they are illegal. But they are like that. Much of the WUI development, especially for vacation homes, is illegal, and how homes are built reflects to a large extent the way in which each WUI area has developed and the purpose for which the homes are used, if they are permanent houses or vacation homes. You can see that we have all these classic typology available, from classic WUI, which is on Hymettus Mountain, to intermix, which is just east of Athens, to isolated WUI, which is west of Athens, in this case, and this is included in the WUI, which is, for example, a large green area within northern parts of Athens. You will see that here it says Marousi. Keep it in mind. In a moment I will show you about it. And in Greece, all WUI types can be found, all these types, but the classic and intermixed categories are more common. The WUI areas, which are numerous, mostly present the intermixed type and only a few occluded type examples. And with the exception of WUI, most other wild and urban interfaces in Greece are found along or at a short distance from the coastline because they are related to vacation homes. So all this is the eastern side of Attica that you saw earlier. And all this is a continuous WUI. And of course, you will not see very much vegetation here because it has been burning like hell in the last few decades. Around Greece, these are the types of vegetation, not very much different than what you have. These are the so-called frigana, and this vegetation is prevalent especially in the islands of the Aegean Sea. They will not give you huge fires, and given the fact that these homes are built with stone or brick and mortar and so on, they are not flammable for this type of fire to destroy them. But that can create deaths of people because it's a fast-moving fire when you have these fine fuels burning. These are the shrubs, very common, or combination of shrubs and pine trees. These are the things that you find around in wild and urban interface in Greece. Sometimes agricultural cultivations are good, well maintained. This is a house that crown fire passed through, and because of this protection, did not suffer anything. This again, the same fire passed on the back of this house. In the front there was olive grove and so on. Again, no problem because they were well maintained. But if it's not, then they're in trouble. And this is when we have main residencies. This is east of Attica, of Athens. These are built with good materials and by rich people, and they are relatively safe. This is a place where the fire passed. We'll see it later. The fire passed, did not cause any damage in this particular settlement. But for example, the roof here, it is cement underneath, and this is just, the tile is just to cover for visual and for insulation. But when we don't have this situation, but we have like the roof can become a point. Illegal homes are homes to be used as main residence by less affluent people, and they are usually of much quality. Yes. Although most of them are built with brick walls, they tend to have many weak spots, such as poor roofing, vinyl shutters, single-pane glass windows, various unprotected openings, structure extension made with gypsum boards or particle boards that may easily ignite if impacted by the fire. And quite often you will see piles of wood for winter time outside, which means that if a spark on this igniting it burns the home next to it. And you see here the roof thicknesses. And what's happening is that they put the tiles and they look nice, but underneath there is a wooden frame and tar paper. And the tar paper ignites very easily if you have firebrands or if you have some heat impregnation on that. And that is where the fire comes within the house. In the rural areas, fire usually destroy houses that have been abandoned for some time or are poorly maintained, as they are used only occasionally, especially in the summer when their owners return to the village from the city for summer vacation. These homes are generally built with bricks, but their weak spot is usually their proximity to untreated vegetation and poorly maintained wooden parts, such as the roof frame and old wooden structures that can ignite quite easily. Most settlements in Greece are generally not well prepared for a hit by a wildland fire. Most people are not fully aware about the danger, some people totally unaware. This includes immigrants from non-Mediterranean countries where wildfires are uncommon. We have had this problem in the late 90s and 2000s. Yards are often full of various types of burnable materials, such as piles of wood for the fireplace, which combined with the lack of vegetation treatment measures increases the potential for destruction. The existence of firefighting infrastructures in WEE areas is quite variable. As a rule, better planned areas, such as newly developed subdivisions, are better prepared with good roads, fire hydrants, etc. The opposite is true for many of the poorly planned, often partly illegal vacation areas. In some cases, fire trucks cannot even enter such areas, and even if they do, they risk being trapped in dead-end roads where it is impossible to turn around. That is, if you have a 4-meter road with cars coming in and out trying to evacuate and so on, it's a nightmare for a fire truck to try and come in the settlement and try to fight fire there. Now, in regard to forest fires, the first recorded large forest fire in WEE area was just north, in the north suburbs of Athens. It was in 1981. The outcome of all that we saw, it was reflected in this particular fire. We saw earlier Marousi. I showed you this to you. This is the area of Marousi. This is the occluded interface I showed you, the Sigros Park, let's say. And this is Kifisia. Kifisia is the place, for those who have been in Athens, the northmost end of the electric railway in the past, line 1 of Metro today. Very high-class area, but at the time, there was plenty of vegetation. So a fire that started from there came all the way down. The conditions were really bad, 33 degrees centigrade, relative humidity of 12%, and wind speed at 5 Beaufort. The fire just accelerated so much that even the fire truck that was at a distance of 200 meters could not catch the fire. I mean, the fire, it was from sparks from a power line. They saw it until they turned the car and were there. the fire had gone through the grasses to the crown and spotted. And with 12%, spotting creates many spot fires. I did not do anything. Sorry. You have to press. No, no.
Well, we always need some kind of unusual, unexpected happenings to make presentations alive, but I never saw one like that, but it's, there is always a first time.
Okay, if we want to go ahead, because there will not be much time available after that, there are many pictures showing what has happened, and it has happened all the time more often. In 2003, 2000 to 2003, we had a project called WARM that focused on wild and urban interface with David Caballero as our coordinator. And what we did is that we tried to collect data on wild and urban interface fires in Greece, which had already started in the 90s, becoming quite prominent and becoming worse and worse. And since that time, I have been monitoring many such fires, and we have seen that the main problem is that the people are not really aware that they are in danger. What happens is that if you show them the statistics, it shows that there is a very high probability, nearly a certainty, that a fire will come to their home in the next 20 years or 25 years, and anyway within their lifetime. So this has to be conveyed. It has not been conveyed by anyone to them. As a result, the problem is that they take no measures. They are not scared except when they live through the fire. And I have even seen people immediately after the fire, when they were cleaning up, saying that I will build here again and with the same way. So it's very difficult to manage to touch them. 2007 was a disaster year for Greece. And in that year, we had 80 fatalities. 80 people were killed. And among them, about 50 of them were people who were living from GUI areas in order to survive the fires, they thought. And it was a wrong decision because the fire caught them in the open. 25 people in one occasion leaving the villages of Makistos and Artemida, and caught in the open and surrounded by fire, they died. In other cases, many other people who were out in the countryside, tourists, even international tourists in Mani, in the end of Peloponnese, they burned because they left the home that they feared would be burned by the fire, and which was not the case. Lack of communication of the authorities to the people with proper information, panic on the side of the people, and the results were like this. So what we are trying to do now is trying to make people aware, is trying to make projects on an effort to have prevention focused, a group focusing on prevention throughout the year, not only on particular period before the fires, the fire season, and also to communicate messages. We do some of this with our site at the Institute, with workshops around the country and so on, in order to try and make them understand the scary situation they live in. Thank you very much. Just going through the pictures quickly. Here is what I was telling you, the fire. Here is within the city of Athens. Now it is built so much that it is more cement than forest, so a fire would not be able to pass through the same areas as it passed in the past. That is, there is a point, and we have not done good research on that, in terms of above which point there is no more capacity for the fire to spread in such a settlement. If we're talking about Australia or the United States, this is not the case because this is where the homes become fuel themselves. Okay, so. Last one? This one? Okay, so it was my mistake. Okay, so we see, just look at this, up to 6 times the same place burned in something like 25 years in Athens, in Attica. You're seeing fires like this. This is one of the largest fires, 20,000 hectares in 2009, coming from the north and burning again Pendeli Mountain, which had burned in 1995, in 1998, in 2001, in 2007, and then again in 2009. So you're seeing it's tremendous. And the problem here is that the fire service concentrated on the 13 settlements that were, let's say, in danger of the fire. So by concentrating on one, they allowed the fire to go to and hit the next. And then when it hit the next, it went to hit 2 more, and so on. And so at the end, they became this big. And here we have a very good example of 2 fires in 2005. One fire and another fire, they are in parallel with a 2-hour difference of start. They burned until the afternoon, late afternoon, and they had totally different results. Same vegetation, but different homes. And we use that as an example. These are first good quality permanent homes. Only 4 or 5 houses burned in there in these 2 settlements, while there was a canyon with lots of tall Pinus halepensis forest. 150 homes here. These are poor, some of them main, but most of them vacation homes. And 150. So the contrast under the same conditions is like a laboratory where you do a one-to-one comparison. You see here, the poor situation is here, the rich situation is here. And we published it, for those who want to find it, in the Wildfire magazine in 2008, so that people could see it. I was asked to do that from people in the United States in order to show it to their own audience. You see here fires next to Athens, on Pendeli Mountain. We go through the pictures just like that. This is 2007, where we had the huge fires in Greece, and there were many problems with RUI areas. Ignorance and panic was what caused death, as I was saying earlier. This is where 23 people plus 1 died. And there was complacency on the side of the people. This village the fire was coming for 2 days to their door, and they did not move their finger to do any prevention, and then the next day the fire just swept through. And sometimes the reason is that we have old people there. And even the young people, when they try to fight, they are going like this. I mean, they have no culture of how to prepare for doing the firefighting. And these are the RUI areas I'm telling you. This is within the village, and this obviously started by a flying ember. But this is not a well-preserved home with new wood and etc. The fatalities are here, and the situation continues. That is 2015, so it didn't change. In conclusion, RUI fires are a significant problem in Greece because of poor planning, poor preparation from the part of the authorities, and ignorance from the side of the people. Poor protection tactics from the side of the fire service exaggerate the problem. Putting emphasis on protecting a particular RUI and nearly ignoring the forest fire itself allows it to spread to the next wild and urban interface or RUI. Well-built and prepared RUIs are unlikely to suffer serious damages. Threat analysis of RUIs, better fire protection planning, and education of the people are required. This is my conclusion. I will only show you one more thing, which is a project that we did. And within that project, developing a methodology on how to approach prevention, we had this form, which is a form about the important things in a home, and that was going into an illegal settlement where we didn't have the cooperation of the people, but we did that giving the forms to volunteers, local volunteers. And they went in a home-by-home basis. In that home-by-home, they put the list for each checklist for each one of the homes, giving the number. And then we were able to calculate, with a methodology that we developed, the risk that comes from the vegetation around the house, the risk that comes from one is the vulnerabilities of the house, the other is the characteristics of the house, developing an overall risk for each home. And then we provided, we looked and we mapped and we saw here, you see how close they are to each other. It means that each one of the owners cannot do their own clearing of vegetation or whatever. They have to be a combined effort. And then we gave this form back to each one of the people. They received through the volunteers the evaluation that is what they have to do in case of fire, if their home is preventable, if they can improve something, and so on. And then we gave them a questionnaire saying how useful has this been to you and if you're going to apply it. And we also developed this software much in the way that Marielle Zopio showed it earlier. We have it on the internet site so that we tell people, go and see if your house is safe or not. So it's an alternative way to the GIS and so on, according to the means and the situation we have. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We are a little bit out of schedule now because of the, so we'll probably reserve some of the questions for the discussion in the afternoon. So we can have the presentation by David Caballero immediately in order to keep the time, because we have also lunch and I also ask to keep it keep the time controlled, David, if it's possible.
How much?
20 minutes?
20 minutes. I was thinking about 40, but
well,
we'll compress down to 20.
Okay, well, thank you.
Hola. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very good old friend, Francisco Rego. May I start thanking the organization of this workshop, especially to Luis and Cristina on the University and the Foresterra project, to have this opportunity to share with you some of the thoughts about the role of the municipalities and owners in the protection of the wild and urban interface. We put there Spain, but we will extend that to other parts in Europe. As we have seen in the campaign of 2016, within the framework of the We Watch project that we have been running for 2 years, we have quite a wealth of lessons learned. I will try to, let's say, project in this presentation about local requirements in terms of protection. To fix ideas, again, I will insist in looking into 3 different scales of the problem of the wild and urban interface. First is what we know as the landscape scale, which is in hands of the region. You know that in Spain we have these autonomic regions, but also the municipality. But we go down to this meso scale, to name so, in which you have the community. Ah, que no se está grabando.
Sí, se está grabando perfectamente. Lo único que tiene es doble pantalla.
Ah, doble pantalla.
Y tú lo vas a ver bien y puedes trabajar.
Perfecto. So we're talking about this meso scale, which is a real challenge, not only for the municipalities, but also for the owners, as we will see later. And finally, what we have been looking at is the micro scale. We have been presenting a lot of approaches, and particularly what our colleagues from France, Marielle Diapiot, is always presenting something way ahead of what we are thinking, but more or less it's in the same framework of thinking, and which are the roles of municipalities in the forest fire defense, taking all these three scales into consideration. First, well, actually the municipality, it's the primary, paramount importance, serving as link between the different scales in the prevention planning. Indeed, what we have here in the macro scale, we have the planner, is the country or the region, proposing those general plans for prevention, but the receptor, the end receptor and implementer is the municipality. So they have to put that in their own, let's say, territory. But at the same time, we go down to the meso scale to work with communities. The planner is the municipality. They have the territorial emergency plans and the out protection plans, and the implementer should be the community. So there's a link between the region and the owners. That's the first thing that the municipality does. And after that, we have the planner. The micro scale should be by regulations the municipality, but the implementer is the owner. The owner is the final receptor of all the science, all the regulations, all the guidelines, because we have this atomization of risk in these, let's say, intermixes that we have in Europe, as we will see afterwards with some of the very relevant, very dramatic samples we have seen in the forest fires and this campaign. We can't separate the scales. We have to start thinking about not only the friction area. It's not just a friction area. When we have a plot of forest with a lot of field there, it is burning and creating this enormous column, as Mark was telling us before. We are facing a total different type of fires, very intense. There's another type of affection, which is the fire brands and the smoke. Given that you have the shadow of the smoke, in that shadow of the smoke, this influence area is affecting houses as well, and that has to be considered. Algo se está acoplando. Something has to be considered in the planning as well. So we have this macro scale, the influence zones, the relationship with the meso scale when the fires it's approaching, whether it is the flame front of the smoke or the fire embers. We have also this relationship between the micro scale and the meso scale. That's tremendously important that we have all the owners working on their own surroundings to create this pattern of the meso scale. This is the 80% of the transformation goes to the owners, to the micro scale. So we have to count on this army of transformers, to territory transformers, to transform and to create this territory which is more adapted to forest fires. So the current trend is to reinforce and qualify local administrations, municipalities for the prevention and self-protection against natural hazards. That was told as one of the conclusions in the Committee of Regions, European Commissions, recently. And we are in line with this, to reinforce the administration, local administrations, to prevent themselves from being affected by natural hazards, and more particularly the forest fires affecting wild and urban interface. Here are some of the examples we have been working with. This is a rather big municipality of Torrelodones, which, as our colleague from Italy was telling before, this part of a unity in the landscape. You cannot separate those municipalities from the surrounding municipalities. Actually, we're working all of us together as a common strategy, so it goes beyond the municipality. It's much better to count, especially in Spain, we have so small municipalities. It's better to work with groups of municipalities. Then down to it, we prepare the territorial emergency plan, always following the same strategy, and taking most of the science and what we see in the forest fires to propose this, the identification of risk, identification of fire scenarios, elaboration of vulnerability map, which is rather new, but absolutely required. Zoning and prioritization, adapt the legislation, regulations, and land ownership, because the owners of the lands which have to be transferred do not own to those who are benefiting of those prevention actions. So we have to couple of all of things by local regulations. Transformation macro scale basically is the landscape strategy, which we are doing in our info regional plans. Transformation meso scale, we have to count, as it has been said before, of a community strategy. Dr. Sanzo was telling you as well, what I do is relevant, but what my neighbor does is also relevant to me. So we have to work as a whole, as a unity, and today that's a real challenge. So we have to change the awareness of the owners, try to change this microscale to overcome that challenge of changing the big landscape, which is almost impossible for the local administration. Yesterday we have with my colleague Emilio De Diego, who is our geographer, he's doing all the territorial analysis with the municipality of Torrelodones, and we're asking them, well, we propose you to change our design of all the gardens in the community of Peñascales. And we were told, that's okay for me, but I cannot enter the gardens. That's the owner. That's the owner land, and it's up to him to change that. I can give you some guides, but I cannot do that. So that's a big challenge for us. And finally, implementation of organizational rules in case of a fire, doing some research. Let's go through very quickly, because it's 8 minutes and 30 seconds, consuming this introduction. It's kind of pressing me. Well, it's identification of scenario and associated risk. What we do normally, with the help of our colleagues, particularly those who are analyzing the territory, our geographers, is try to capture the most of the information about vegetation and the structures. Our colleague from France is showing us some very nice, very promising technologies to gather that information and give us an idea which is the distribution of the forest fuel, including and mostly the forest fuel inside the settlements, which traditionally has been neglected in the land use maps that we have officially. So here you have more or less a distribution. Then we can classify each of the plots according to the ability to transfer the fires. We have to think, when we think about fires, as I told you, forest fires in wildland interface is not just friction. It's above all, it is firebrands. It's an aerial attack. So we have to think of the enemy inside as well, not just the surrounding wall. So we do this analysis as we do normally in the strategy in the forest fires, analyzing which are the critical points, the runs that we expect, the way the fire is hitting our settlements, the most important, how the fire is hitting. If there's ground, aerial, firebrands, it is smoke. If we have accumulation of fuel there, we can expect the rise of the intensity in the projection of firebrands. So the problem is not just the left flank hitting, which is, but also the projection of the firebrands maybe 1 kilometer ahead and cutting the only way out of this nice settlement in Valdemorillo in Madrid. That is what I'm talking about. That's a picture of Madeira. You have the friction area, which we consider the wildland interface. It's the second area in which we have some vegetation and mixed with houses affected by firebrands. They are atomizing 1,000 of different emergencies. And as Mark was telling before, it's demanding, extremely demanding for firefighters to attend all these hundreds of emergencies in there. And finally, the urban area down there is also affected by smoke. And those guys won't close the opens, won't close the windows, and we have some houses and we have that. So we have to extend the concept of wildland interface, not a friction, but an affection area of affection. As I told you, all this put in the sandbox gives us an idea of how solid, how robust our planning is or not. Definitely, we are putting hundreds of different resources. This is telling us, you are failing. If you are trying to do this, you are failing. If you are trying to stop this fire, the gap between prevention and operation is enormous. As Mark told us before, he gave us the metric for that. He gave us the metric of the success of prevention. I have to take a decision, he was telling us, but I have to be prepared to lose something. This that is being lost, this is the metric of prevention. And sometimes the gap is enormous. I can prevent a couple of houses, but I cannot save 1,000 houses, so the gap is enormous. We need prevention. Given that we have a big fires, the gap will be wider and wider. So we need prevention above all. Now on. In the future, we need the self-prevention. In self-prevention, we have to transform our communities to give an opportunity to firefighters, or at least to self-protect ourselves. And here's where municipalities and owners play a key role of paramount importance. Here we have some 3 barriers in the mesoscale, the internal, perimeter, and external. What we did in these municipalities basically is to identify which were not only the points of here, the fire hitting the settlement, also in case of this fire branch projection, which were the undeveloped lots who could create at the same time high-intensity fires and locally project against the fire branch. So we have to prevent to have high-intensity fires, as this in the Benitachel fire this year in Alicante. High-intensity fire, locally. This is not a front. It is locally, and it's projecting again a lot of fire brands and starting new fires in edges and other undeveloped lots. So we are creating a fire by jumps, spotting fire, but also with all these edges. Our colleagues from France were studying. There are vectors to propagate the fire to other undeveloped lots and creating this kind of non-continuous propagation, but extremely demanding type of fire propagation. 13 minutos 59. This is more or less the schema I was talking about. You have high-intensity projecting fires to other places. Again, our French colleagues, I'm sorry, I love this. They have a rule of cleaning around the house for 50 meters around. So if you do that in every plot, you are creating a tissue, and a pattern, even if you are just cleaning with all the trees, but you give it the opportunity to the fire to be low intensity. The fire will pass, will be low intensity. You are creating an opportunity. Which one? Well, I connected the mesoscale, which is this. I'm creating the mesoscale and connected it to the microscale. This is a lot in which the owner created a green island by irrigation, by drop irrigation, all year round. So we are creating a green with no dead fine fuel load there. So it's just high moisture of living plants, low loads of fine fuel dead. That's the key role. So the fire passes and so. So what we have here some examples what we did following those rules that we don't have in Spain at all. We have just the 25 meters, but it's, by all means it's defective. We are creating these patterns inside by cleaning, but also creating spaces, as our colleagues are telling, dialogue spaces, in which the people are using those spaces and maintaining, creating not only resistant but resilient structures, as we did in Torrelodones, which is a very nice example of reducing the fuel load, but giving these paths to enjoy the forest as well. We give a special importance, or again, following our colleagues from France, the importance of perimeter lots, because they are hitting, they are receiving the fire, whether it's in flank, front, or rear, in sometimes when we create this perimeter fuel break, we do not take care of those perimeter lots, which are as important as the fuel break. They are part of the fuel break because the firefighters will operate in the other row of streets, just in the other road, not in the front. So we have to prepare that in advance. If we do not look at that, we are creating high-intensity spots in which will project, again, those fire brands we do not want to have. Here we have accumulations of all type of fuels and some of the species escaping from the gardens, entering the in creating this high intensity. And this is the role of the owners. In this case, our colleagues from the firefighters from Madrid, there are some fire chiefs here, they did a huge effort to create an 80 meters fire break around this settlement, but inside, just opposite, you have that. So the fire is running from the little stream of Guadarrama, and then it's projecting high speed, projecting a shower of firebrands inside the settlement, which has not been treated. By no means this is prepared. This is non-defensible space. Maybe this is a defensible space. That's the work done by firefighters of Madrid, but this is not defensible space. So, and the municipality cannot do anything at all. The firefighters of the region cannot do anything at all, but they are facing this. So, by all means, we need some commitment of the owners to continue this structure inside the settlements. 3 minutos, que agobio. Some examples about the design that we have been in some of the fires. This is in Benitachena, Alicante, in the East Coast, one of the most beautiful places in Spain that we have. The fire hit, more or less hit the right flank, hit the settlement, and managed to continue for almost 2 kilometers jumping the way I told you before. But all these structures prevented the houses to be affected because they created no more or less by design a separation between the fire and the houses. Well, we'll run a little bit more. What I say about perimeter fire breaks, when we are asking the municipality to create that, think about that perimeter fire breaks. Our colleagues from Matinsa around here, we work together with in this area. This is in Maruán, Segovia, where we have this nice fire break, but as far as the vegetation is growing, the fire break is not growing. Not only that, it's not maintained. So in the 12, 20 years that will be absorbed by the vegetation, we have to create something more than fire breaks. What we suggest to do is to create this type of structures, extending a little bit more, and even taking advantage, as you see in this fire, of the cultivated agricultural lands to serve us as stop the fire. Well, I will jump this. This is basically the software we are using to calculate to which extent we have to transform the vegetation to ensure the safety of the firefighters operating in the roads and in the homes. I mean, which is the guilty? Who's the first vegetation to be treated? You see here 2 things. First, we have to start from the inside, treating the garden. Second is, well, the perimeters should be more than 20 meters, maybe 180, 200 meters of transformation. We are talking, the landscape it is demanding us much more transformation, otherwise we will facing big fires. In the case of the micro scale, we have several processes going on. In the local micro scale, I'm not talking about the main fire front. I'm disconnected to some extent. I'm thinking about the house and the surroundings, as was presented by Marielle Japiot. The smoke, fire brands, radiation, convection, on how the embers in the smoke managed to enter through the open windows, which is the most of the cases, breaking the windows and so. And the role of the nearby fuels. Not only the structures, as Marielle Japiot told us, well, this is a flammable green thing, but with a lot of fine dead fuel inside, which is what's giving us the fire load around the houses and finally creating the destruction. So edges, as they did, edges is what we have first of all to look into, at least in Spain, create green spots, as I told you. This is a very dramatic example as well in France. It is the fire of Rognac, Vitrolles, in which we have this house was surrounded almost by no other trees by these 3 cypress, and they have this contact with the roof and destroy the whole house. So the message here, I'm finishing, Francisco, is that the relevant fuels is, first of all, the patches of forest fireway that are creating this column and this shower of fire brands and the nearby. the nearby fields, maybe not forest field, but the garden, all the garbage that we have that create this destruction that we saw. This is in Alicante as well. Well, several dramatic examples. This was in Madeira, exactly the same. We saw with Dr. Santhopoulos in the fires, he was presenting exactly the same, surrounded by all type of materials and created destruction. So what we do is to big wise by side with the firefighters, and before this, what Mark was telling you, the pre-triage. I can defend this, but I cannot defend this. I'm sorry, I will tell you in advance before it happens, to put in value the prevention, because I want this what will be lost. This is the value of prevention, what it is going to be lost. This is in Collserola, near Barcelona. And finally, final note, I'm sorry, but I'm taking 2 or 3 minutes more. The final note about other domino effects, and particularly in Spain we have this, which is uncharted territory. I mean, we have our legislation is very weak compared with the Italian or the French one. We have to take care of the distances and the fuel load around the LGP tanks that eventually will create a big disaster. What I'm ending, final remarks, just to underline the key roles of municipalities. We told vulnerability mapping, risk identification, prevention planning, execution of works and landscape transformation. For me, that's a very key important thing. Information awareness with owners, regulatory and recaudatory, why not? Role, technical assessment and support, review auto protection plans, but we have to provide some training for the technical staff. Otherwise, they won't do that. Surveillance, dissuasion and police, to see that things have been doing well. Organization activities of the plan and serve as a communication link between owners, neighbors, local action groups, businesses, firefighters, and so we have some needs. Personal training and budget resources, provision, training and municipality technical staff, to me that's very important. Creation of field protection group. This has to be done. Otherwise, we are asking them to do things they are not prepared for. So we are doing nothing. Budget provisioning, service and infrastructure for forest fire defense. Well, all this has been more or less done within the WeWatch project. I'm invited to visit our website and get some material out of this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope we can keep this long friendship after this struggle on the minutes. And I'm not sure if you are going to be in the afternoon session.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we can keep the discussions with Gabriel and David for the afternoon session. And thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. Thank you.
So thank you very much to all the speakers for these excellent presentations, and thank you also to everybody for your understanding, for keep your questions for this afternoon session, because we are having a session of 2 hours of roundtable and then questions, etc. And the session in this afternoon will be in Spanish with a simultaneous translation into English. I should remind you that we are changing the place. We are going to the other building. It is very close to here. Those of you that are having lunch together, we are going downstairs. Please follow the organizing committee. I think you already knows Katarina and Oscar. And we are going together downstairs for lunch. Take your tickets, please. Thank you for everything. And, oh yes, streaming will continue this afternoon in the other place. So those of you that are not physically here but following us on streaming, please keep in contact since 2:30. 2:30, we will continue 2:30 in the other place. Enjoy.